Hi everybody. Today in this video we're going to look at the structure in the cadaver, primarily the nose of course, and we're going to look at the nasal cavity and the structures that we come across within the nasal cavity. And so let's get started then. Okay. Okay, so in order to get oriented, so this is the nasal cavity here, and this I'm going to stick this through the nostril nares that goes through the openings, the external nasal aperture, and then enters to the nasal cavity. And so this whole area is the nasal cavity. This is the basically forms the floor of the nasal cavity, and also it also forms the roof of the oral cavity. So this area, just to get you oriented, this is the oral cavity here. This is the tongue. Okay, these are the teeth, and this is the mouth. Okay, so this is so this is the lower jaw. Okay, the mandible, the tongue, oral cavity, and this is the oropharynx here. So today we're gonna concentrate on the nasal cavity. So this is the nasal cavity. So it enters to the nasal cavity from the outside through the what we call as the nostrils nares, so external nasal aperture. So the air goes through that opening and then to the nasal cavity. From here, at the back, we have the posterior nasal aperture, or the internal nasal aperture, or what we call as the choana. Choana is singular, choani is plural. So choani basically connects the nasal cavity to the nasopharynx. So here we have the nasopharynx here. Okay, this is the uvula. So this is the nasopharynx, this area, and then the nasopharynx opens through the oropharynx, and oropharynx goes down, opens to the laryngopharynx. So basically what we call as the throat, the back part of the neck, is the pharynx, nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx. At the level of laryngopharynx, so it divides into two areas. So it basically continues towards the two cavities. At the front, we have the laryngeal cavity. At the back, we have the esophagus, or larynx. Larynx continues with the trachea. At the back, the laryngopharynx continues at the back via or as the esophagus. Okay, let's get back to the nasal cavity here. So let's look at the boundaries of the walls of the nasal cavity. This is the floor of the nasal cavity here. Here we have the roof of the nasal cavity. Okay, the inferior wall, the superior wall, and then here we have the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. The medial wall is on this side. I'm going to show you that. So the medial wall is a septum. So you don't see it here. Okay, that's the medial wall. So I'm going to show the septum in another cadaver, the head of another cadaver. So now let's look at the floor, roof, and the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. So this is the floor. It's composed of two bony parts. At the front, this front part is the maxillary bone. At the back is the palatine bone. To be most specific, this is the palatine process of maxilla. At the back here is the horizontal plate of palatine bone. Okay, yeah. So this is the horizontal plate of palatine bone, and this is the palatine process of maxilla. So these two bones, they come together. Okay, they form the hard palate, and it is also referred to as what we call as the palatin durum. Durum means hard. And at the back, this is the soft palate. This is called the palatin molle. Molle is a soft palate. So soft palate is basically, as you can see, is part of the nasopharynx. So soft palate is not, it does not comprise the wall of the nasal cavity. So we have the horizontal plate of palatine process of maxilla at the front, and then we have the horizontal plate of palatine bone. Makes up the floor, and also it makes it the roof at the same time of the oral cavity. So that's the floor. At the roof, as you can see here, it starts somewhere around here. So we have, this is the lateral nasal cartilage here, and then we have the nasal bone here. the section of the nasal bone, and then we have the frontal bone. And the frontal bone, you can see this opening here, space. This is the frontal sinus, by the way. So we have nasal bone, frontal bone. Okay, frontal bone, and here is at the mid part, the center of the roof, and this is the ethmoid bone, but this is the cribriform plate of ethmoid here, and we'll talk about this. So this is the cribriform plate of ethmoid. Going posteriorly is the corpus of the sphenoid bone, and inside this corpus, of the body of the sphenoid, you have this space here, empty space filled with air. Again, this is the sphenoid sinus. So this basically all these makes up the roof of the nasal cavity. So let's look at the lateral wall here. Lateral wall, as you can see, this bone here is the maxilla, the most anterior, and then we have the lacrimal bone just next to it. So going from anterior to posterior is maxilla, and then we have the lacrimal bone. Here, the mid part of the nasal cavity, we have these shelf-like or shell-like bony protrusions that protrudes from the lateral wall of the nasal cavity is the concha. It's also referred to as turbinate. So we have three turbinates. We have the superior concha, superior turbinate. We have the middle concha, middle turbinate. And we have the inferior concha or inferior turbinate. Okay, and the superior and middle concha is part of ethmoid. So these are basically it's not a separate bone. It's part of the ethmoid. Superior concha, middle concha is part of ethmoid, and the inferior concha here is a separate bone. And if we go backwards, we have the perpendicular plate of palatine bone here. The perpendicular plate of palatine bone. The most posteriorly located bone here is the medial plate of pterygoid process sphenoid. So this is sphenoid bone. It has medial lateral plates. And medial lateral plates, like I mentioned earlier, they look like the leg of a bat. Okay, so this is medial located, this is medial plate, and then we have lateral located part, which is lateral process, lateral plate, and these two plates make up the pterygoid processes. So this is the medial plate of pterygoid process of the sphenoid bones. This is the body of the sphenoid. Okay, so that's the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. Now, and then we have the medial wall, which is formed by the nasal septum, which we can't see it here. It's taken off. I'm going to show you this in the other cadaver. Okay, so let's continue and look at the paranasal sinuses and the drainage of these paranasal sinuses. The first paranasal sinus that we have here we have at the back. Okay, so we have, like I said earlier, so the location of these paranasal sinuses, we can, designate or identify them according to the position of the eye. So if it's above the eye, so the eye is somewhere around here. Above the eye, it's the frontal sinus. If it's behind the eye, it's sphenoid sinus. If it's in between the eye, so we have another eye around here. If it's in between the eye, it's ethmoid sinuses, which is located somewhere around here. And if it's below the eyes, and it basically drains somewhere around here, is the maxillary sinus. Okay, so let's start with the sphenoid sinus. Sphenoid sinus opens. Sphenoid sinus, the secretion of the sphenoid sinus drains into what we call as sphenoethmoidal recess. So this is the area what we call as sphenoethmoidal recess. It's located, as you can see, at the between the roof and the sphenoid bone and the roof of the nasal cavity and the superior concha. So there's a recess here. Okay, it's like a pocket. Okay, so it opens to the sphenoethmoidal recess. So this area is called the sphenoethmoidal recess, where the sphenoid sinus opens to or drains into. And then we have at the front here, we have the frontal sinus, as you can see here. Okay, frontal sinus basically opens. Frontal sinus opens to. So there's a duct here. So there's a nasofrontal duct. And nasofrontal duct. If I get the middle concha out of the way. Okay. So before this, let me demonstrate the structures that you would see beneath the middle concha or middle turbinate. So let me get the middle concha out of the way, just beneath the middle concha. Okay. So beneath the middle or below the middle concha, we see this bulging tissue here. I don't know if you can see it, but this tissue, This bulging mucosa that we see here is called the bulla ethmoidalis, or ethmoidal bulla, which is this, okay? In front of this bulla, okay, like anterior and inferiorly, we have this empty space here, okay? And this is called the hiatus semilunaris, or semilunar hiatus. And basically, in front of this hiatus is this bony protrusion here, this bony part here, and that's called the Ansonate process. And Ansonate process is part of the ethmoid. So in between Ansonate process and bulla, we see this empty space here, and this is called the hiatus semilunaris. Okay, so this is the bulla ethmoidalis. So what happens is that this is the frontal sinus. Frontal sinus opens to what we call as nasofrontal duct, and nasofrontal duct opens to what we call the initial part of the hiatus infundibulum. So what we say is the frontal sinus drains into the infundibulum. Okay, from the infundibulum, it basically passes on to this hiatus, and from the hiatus, as you can see, it continues to the what we call as the medial meatus. Meatus are the basically empty areas or spaces, wide empty spaces beneath the turbinate. So we have this is the superior concha. We have the superior meatus beneath that. We have the middle concha, middle turbinate beneath that. This area is the middle meatus. This is the inferior concha, inferior turbinate. Beneath that, this space, this rote of empty space is called the inferior meatus. So basically, the frontal sinus opens the nasofrontal duct, and then from there, the initial part of the hiatus, which is called the infundibulum. From the infundibulum, the secretion basically travels along the hiatus semilunaris and then opens to the middle meatus ultimately. So that's the frontal sinus. Let's look at now the ethmoidal air cells, the ethmoidal sinuses. Now, ethmoidal air cells, the ethmoidal sinus, basically is located somewhere around here, at this area here. And we divide them into three categories, three groups. We have the anterior ethmoidal air cells, middle ethmoidal air cells, and then we have the posterior ethmoidal air cells. Now, anterior ethmoidal air cells, basically they open to the anterior part of the hiatus. Okay, so this is the hiatus semilunaris. So the anterior ethmoidal air cells open to the anterior part of the hiatus. Now, the middle ethmoidal air cells are located in the bulla ethmoidalis. So it's located somewhere around here. This is bulla ethmoidalis. So I'm going to show you the primarily the middle ethmoidal air cells in the other cadavera. So the middle ethmoidal air cells are located somewhere around here and beneath the bulla ethmoidalis. So basically, the middle ethmoidal air cells drains into the surface of the bulla. So there's little holes there. Through those little holes, it drains on the surface of the bulla ethmoidalis. From here, then it basically, some of them might go into the hiatus, or some might directly drain into the middle meatus. So ultimately, the middle ethmoidal air cells drains into the middle meatus. So that's the middle ethmoidal air cells. And then we have the posterior ethmoidal air cells located at the back, and it's very close to the sphenoid sinus. And they drain into the superior meatus. So they directly drain into the superior meatus. Okay, so these are the other side. Okay, so there's also another, like agarnas, which we can't see, and it's located somewhere around here at this area. Why? Because agarnazi is located very close to the nasofrontal duct. So nasofrontal duct is somewhere around here. So the agarnazi is located very close to, in association to this duct. So when this gets swollen, okay, when it gets when the volume, if there's an irritation or inflammation in the agarnazi, they would compress on this duct. Okay, when the duct is compressed, so you would end up having accumulation of fluid in the frontal sinus, and ultimately, in chronic situations, you would have a frontal sinusitis due to the compression of the agarnazi. Okay, so that's that. And the last sinus that we have here that open to the middle meatus is the maxillary sinus, which we can't see. I'm going to show you the opening of the maxillary sinus in the other cadavera. So that's so we have four sinuses that open to the middle meatus. and we have one sinus that opens to the superior meatus, which is the posterior ethmoidal air cells. And then we have one structure that opens to the inferior meatus, which is the nasolacrimal duct that comes from the eye. The tears basically drain into the inferior meatus. So that's that. So these are the drainage and opening of the paranasal sinuses. Okay. Okay, so like I said, I was going to show you the septum, the medial wall of the nasal cavity in another cadaver here. So this is what we see. Okay, so this is the septum here. So this is the medial wall of the nasal cavity, the nasal septum. So nasal septums, again, this is the this is the nares of nostrils here, by the way. Then we have the lateral wall on this side. So this is the medial wall, which is made out of nasal septum. So nasal septum, as you can see here, it's a cartilaginous bony component. At the anterior aspect, 1/3 of the nasal septum is formed of cartilage. So this is a septal cartilage here. Okay, septal cartilage, and the rest, the posterior superior, posterior inferior, is composed of bone. The posterior superior, this is the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. Okay, this is the perpendicular plate of ethmoid, and this area is, so this posterior superior is perpendicular plate of ethmoid, posterior inferior is formed by the vomer. So all these three components come together and they form what we call as the nasal septum. Okay, and so this is what makes the septum of the nasal cavity. If you look at the back here, so part of the nasal septum also forms part of the wall of the choana or choanae. The septum divides the nasal cavity into two halves. So we have one half, which is this, and then we have another half on this side here. Okay, so this is septum divides the nasal cavity into two halves, and the opening, as you can see, is called the posterior nasal aperture or internal nasal aperture, or choana or choanae. And so choana basically is the area where you have the continuation of nasal cavity to the nasopharynx. So after this opening, well, the area that you see is the nasopharynx. So this area is the nasopharynx, as you can see here. Nasopharynx, then we have the oropharynx, and then we have the laryngopharynx. Okay, so it basically goes down in this direction. Okay, so let's look at the other part of the. Okay, so let's look at the nasal cavity on this side. So if you look at the nasal cavity, the reason why I show you this is that so this is here is the nares or nostrils. Okay, this is the external nasal aperture. It goes in, the air basically goes in through here. And so in the nasal cavity, we see three zones, three areas of three regions. The first region, just next to the opening, next to the nostrils, is the vestibulum, or vestibular area, vestibular region, which is this area here. And in the vestibular area, vestibular area is basically covered by skin. Okay, skin, and the epithelium of that area is the stratified squamous epithelium. And just next to this vestibulum, there's an elevation of tissue here. This is called Lehmann nazi. Okay, Lehmann nazi basically divides the vestibular region from the respiratory region. Okay, so this is the regio vestibulum, and this is the regio respiratoria, the respiratory region and the vestibular region. And the division in between this is the Lehmann nazi. The Lehmann nazi is basically a transition zone. The respiratory region is covered by pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium with goblet cells. So basically we call that as a respiratory epithelium. So stratified squamous basically changes into the respiratory epithelium at the level of the Lehmann nazi. That was my point there. So this area is called is the respiratory region, and it's covered by the respiratory epithelium. And at the roof areas, somewhere around here, is the olfactory region, or regio olfactoria. This is where the cribriform plate of ethmoid is located, or foramina. There's like 20 to 30 holes, which we call as foramina, and you have these olfactory epithelial cells here, the bipolar cells, which make up the olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1. And you have these sustentacular cells, supporting cells, and the basal cells. Okay, so this area is the olfactory region, just above the superior concha. The other thing that I want to show you in this, so I showed you that. The other is that, so if we lift the middle concha out, so this area here is the bulla ethmoidalis, the bulging tissue. Okay, so inside this bulla, we can see these air cells. So all these are basically the middle ethmoidal air cells. So basically, at the posterior aspect, we have the posterior ethmoidal air cells, middle ethmoidal air cells, and then we have the anterior ethmoidal air cells. So we see these, you see these compartments? Okay, these compartments basically are the cells. Cells means the compartments, and basically in the mid part, beneath the bulla ethmoidalis is the middle ethmoidal air cells. And middle ethmoidal air cells basically, so you don't see the protrusion, the bulging of the bulla. So we basically resected, or we took the surface part of the bulla, and inside the bulla we see these middle ethmoidal air cells here. And here we can see clearly the hiatus. Okay, so we can see this space here, a semilunar space, and this is called the hiatus semilunaris. In front of that is the uncinate process. And the initial part of the hiatus semilunaris, or semilunar hiatus, is the infundibulum. So we have the infundibulum, and then we have the hiatus. As you can see, the posterior aspect of the hiatus here, we see a big hole here. It shouldn't be that big, and this is the area where the maxillary sinus open to. So we have the maxillary sinus, we have the duct of the maxillary sinus, and then we have the ostium. So this basically the area, this open space is the ostium for the maxillary sinus that opens to the hiatus. From here, it ultimately opens to the middle meatus, drains into the middle meatus. Okay, so basically that's about it. And so, okay, so that's about it. Okay, so in this video we looked at the cadaver, the wet specimen, in two different wet specimens. We looked at the internal aspect of the nasal cavity and the structures and the paranasal sinuses and where they drained. Hope you liked it, and good luck in your exam. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.